Well, we're still working on the third angel's message. And last time it was too many things to fit into one sermon on the 7 plagues. That's part of the reward of the beast. Now, the church that you see is the other half of the beast. That's the Greek Orthodox. And they are working hard, or I shouldn't say they are, but the main beast is working hard to get them to rejoin and unite with them. And so far it hasn't worked, but from what we know from the Bible, it will eventually work. And there will be unity once again with the two halves of the beast power.
Is the camera on? Your recording camera.
Yeah. Yeah, why do you think it's not?
Red light went on and it was circling around.
I think it's on now. Looks like it's on. So the text that we're looking at is Revelation 14, verse 10. That the beast shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture. In other words, no mercy this time, only justice. Now, due to the wrong emphasis that many people are giving today, they almost make it sound evil if God gives out justice. But if you take the Bible as a whole, justice is just as important as mercy. If people do not respond to the mercy that God has, then it is very appropriate for justice to be given. God's preference is for mercy, but those that reject the mercy have to receive justice. And part of that justice is the 7 last plagues. So we'll start with the 6th plague this time, Revelation 16, verse 12. And the 6th angel poured out his vial upon the great river Euphrates, and the water thereof was dried up, that the way of the kings of the east might be prepared. Now, of course, in the book of Revelation, there are symbols, and you have to identify what the symbol is talking about. There's a variety of views in regard to this plague, but I'm going to give you the best light I have on it. In Revelation 17, verse 15, it has a key text. And he saith unto me, the waters which thou sawest, where the whore sitteth, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. Now we usually use that about why the beasts come up out of the sea, but this key represents, I believe, the Euphrates River also. We're not as familiar with that one because it's way on the other part of the world, but it is an incredibly powerful river and one that is in the center of Bible history. And so this Euphrates then is talking about this mighty movement that the beast and the image of the beast have created. And they've essentially united the entire world except for a small group of people. They've gotten them all together going in one direction. They have unity, and it's like it does what the mighty river Euphrates is able to do. But in this plague, the river dries up, which means God is going to do some things to that mighty movement, and we'll look at some of it. And the reason why this river is to be dried up is because the kings of the east are coming. And the Bible helps us to know what that represents. Even back in Isaiah chapter 41, verses 2 through 4, it says, who raised up the righteous man from the east. Now, as we read this, you'll see it's talking about Jesus, the righteous man from the east. Called him to his foot, gave the nations before him, and made him rule over kings. He gave them as the dust to his sword. In other words, you don't want to fight with him. It's like you're dust to his sword. And as driven stubble to his bow. You know, stubble produces some chaff that the wind can blow, and so it's saying that's the way it's going to be in front of his bow. He pursued them and passed safely, even by the way that he had not gone with his feet. Who hath wrought and done it, calling the generations from the beginning? And here comes the answer. I, the Lord, the first, and with the last, I am he. So he says, I'm the one that's done it. But notice it calls him a righteous man from the east. The book Great Controversy also picks up this in page 640, talking about the actual coming of Jesus. Soon there appears in the east a small black cloud, about half the size of a man's hand. It is the cloud which surrounds the Savior, and which seems in the distance to be shrouded in darkness. The people of God know this to be the sign of the Son of Man. So in preparation for the second coming of Christ, the river Euphrates dries up. And that's a different kind of plague from the other plagues, but it's going to be the hardest for them to bear, because they thought they were in the right, and they thought they were actually going to accomplish their mission of wiping out every Sabbath keeper, and all of a sudden events turn and the river gets dried up. A little more from this sixth plague. And I saw, this is verses 13 and 14, and I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. Now these are, I didn't put text in, but these are fairly easy to know who they are. The dragon, there are several verses that point out that's the devil. In this case, it's no doubt representing spiritualism. And then the beast, of course, we identified before. When I gave the clues, you knew who it was, the Catholic Church. And the false prophet, a representative of the Protestants who started out okay, but they ended up becoming false prophets. And these 3 get together. Can I say they got together? Because today there isn't much left before they are fully united together. Amen. Almost all of the Protestant churches are reaching out to the Catholic Church to join the Catholic Church. One of their very popular leaders several years ago, this is not real current, but several years ago, he stated in public, it was all over the internet, the protest is over. And so we're going back to the Catholic Church. Well, these 3 are going to be united. That's what produces this river Euphrates. And it explains how they got united. For they are the spirits of devils working miracles, which go forth unto the kings of the earth and of the whole world, to gather them to the battle of that great day of God Almighty. So these 3 unclean spirits, which are like frogs, they unite these 3 powers together. And we have this statement, it's also in Great Controversy, but I have it from Christian Service, page 160. It says, through the two great errors, the immortality of the soul and Sunday sacredness, Satan will bring the people under his deceptions. The Catholic Church teaches Sunday sacredness. They teach when you die, there is something still alive. All the Protestant churches teach the same, exactly the same. And of course, the devil teaches the same. So they have unity on these two topics, especially, and they're very powerful to unite them. While the former lays the foundation of spiritualism, the latter creates a bond of sympathy with Rome. So when you believe that when you die, you don't really die, that opens the door to Satan to bring supposedly dead relatives to you and to do all kinds of things, and you fall for it because you believe that it's real. And so it unites these three together because they all accept that, and they all get fooled by the devil's tricks. Also, the bond is created because they worship on the same day. There's not even one text that says you should worship on that day, but that unites. And so it says the Protestants of the United States will be foremost in stretching their hands across the gulf to grasp the hand of spiritualism. So Protestants are going to be the big pusher on this to bring this unity. They will reach over the abyss to clasp hands with the Roman power, and under the influence of this threefold union, this country will follow in the steps of Rome in trampling on the rights of conscience. So this mighty river, Euphrates, is created by these three powers uniting. Spiritualism, the beast power, and Protestantism. And they get united because they all teach that when you die, you don't really die, and that you should worship on Sunday. And so they get together. They feel like we can unite. And the smaller issues we won't worry about, but we will unite because we agree on these two. Now, I've heard different ideas about these three frogs, but I'm going to give you mine. You'll notice the wording, if you look at it carefully. 3 frogs came out of the mouth of all 3. 3 frogs, not one frog. Originally, I thought, just reading it hastily, I thought, well, 1 frog is coming out of each one. But it says 3 frogs came out of each of these powers. So as I look around today, what is it that is uniting these 3 powers besides those 2 false doctrines? Well, number 1 is false education. If you can mess up young people before they get started in life, you will probably have them for the rest of their life. And in fact, the Catholic Church teaches that. They say, give us a child until, I think it's 7. Give us a child until he's 7, he'll be a Catholic the rest of his life. Well, that's a true philosophy, but we don't want to use that philosophy with children up till 7 years old. However, in the whole world, most of the education is infiltrated by the Catholics. And so they are molding the minds of our young people, getting them ready to be a part of this tremendous movement, and they're doing it through education. Another one that is very, very powerful is that the devil's music has been coming into the church. Now, if you go to a rock concert, of course, you would expect the devil's music out there But the devil has been bringing his kind of music into the church. He brought it into the Catholic Church. He brought it into the Protestant churches. And that's how he's helping to unite people. And you know, when you think about these three, well, let me go to the third one. The real definition of actors is hypocrite. Most people don't know that. But as a young child, I watched television come into Adventist homes. And it became something that Adventists, and of course other people too, spend hours in front of the television. What they didn't realize is that the devil was coming through these programs to prepare them to be a part of this. And now it's coming into the church. Have you noticed how much acting is going on in the church? And even young people are wanting to become filmmakers and have, learn how to be an actor and so on. Those three things use something that the frog has, the tongue. The tongue of a frog is deadly. And some frogs have a tongue that can go out 3 or 4 feet to get their prey. They're amazing. And so the tongue is selected, warning us about the 3 ways that Satan would work to try to corrupt and to bring about this unity. Going on in this 6th plague, it says, "Behold, I come as a thief. Blessed is he that watcheth, and keepeth his garments, lest he walk naked." Now we're naked if we don't have the righteousness of Christ surrounding us and him living in our hearts. And so all of us are in danger. You can have it and you can lose it by next week. And so God is warning us, be careful, don't lose that. You need to keep Jesus living in your heart, and you need to be covered with his righteousness, not your righteousness, but his righteousness. Lest he walk naked and they see his shame. None of us would like to be caught in front of other people naked. But if you don't have the righteousness of Christ, you're naked. That's what the Bible presents. And he gathered them together into a place called in the Hebrew tongue Armageddon. Now it's important to notice, under the 6th plague, they're gathered. The Battle of Armageddon isn't during the 6th plague, or at least it might begin, but the main battle of Armageddon is after the 6th plague. But the 6th plague has to do with gathering them together, and it says a place in the Hebrew tongue, Armageddon, called Armageddon. Well, a lot of people think that's a literal place, but all the other things are not literal. They're symbols, so why would this one be any different? And I don't think we have to worry about a certain place. What's going to happen at this hour that we're talking about is worldwide. It's not in a certain place. Now here's some things that it would take more time than what I had to get it fully nailed down. But this is part of the picture of how the river Euphrates gets stopped, how it dries up. This is from Last Day Events, page 246. With shouts of triumph, jeering, and imprecation, throngs of evil men are about to rush upon their prey, when lo, a dense blackness deeper than the darkness of the night falls upon the earth. Now, the White Estate put that one under the 5th plague. I don't think it belongs there. There is a darkness on the seat of the beast in the 5th plague, it's true. But this is the one that comes when the river Euphrates gets dried up. And so here we see this mighty river Euphrates just about ready to accomplish their objective. They have God's people in their sights. They're going to get them. They're going to destroy them. But all of a sudden, this blackness comes over them. It says, then a rainbow, shining with the glory from the throne of God, spans the heavens and seems to encircle each praying company. The angry multitudes are suddenly arrested. See, the river is starting to dry up. They stop in their tracks. They can't move forward. Their mocking cries die away. The objects of their murderous rage are forgotten. They have something else to worry about now other than the people of God. In Great Controversy 636, it says, it is at midnight that God manifests his power for the deliverance of his people. So it's midnight as far as how dark it is, and it's midnight as far as the worst possible moment of Earth's history. Here's what happens. The sun appears, shining in its strength. Signs and wonders follow in quick succession. The wicked look with terror and amazement on the scene. And while the sermon's fresh in your mind, you might like to read the last couple of chapters in Great Controversy. It gives a lot of details we don't have time to give here. Here's the thing that scares them the most. Great Controversy 639. There appears against the sky a hand holding two tables of stone folded together. The hand opens the tables, and there are seen the precepts of the Decalogue, traced as with a pen of fire. The words are so plain that all can read them. And all of a sudden, they wake up to the fact that the fourth commandment does not ask for Sunday keeping. It calls for the seventh day to be kept. But it's too late for them to change, and so they're scared to death. Going back to the seventh angel now, seventh plague, Revelation 16, 17, and 18. And the seventh angel poured out his vial into the air, and there came a great voice out of the temple of heaven from the throne saying, it is done. In other words, you're finished. You're not going to trouble my people anymore. You're finished. But he didn't just speak the words. He didn't just say it is done. And there were voices and thunders and lightnings. Now, to give you an idea of what the lightning is going to be like, here's a sentence from Great Controversy 638. Fierce lightnings leap from the heavens, enveloping the earth in a sheet of flame. Now, you know, God always does something on a small scale before he does it on a big scale. In one of the plagues of Egypt, there was lightning running all over the ground. And Moses had the faith to believe that he could walk through that lightning and get back to Goshen, and God protected him, but nobody else wanted to walk out there with the lightning running everywhere on the ground. Well, that was just a small illustration of this lightning that's going to envelop the whole earth in a sheet of flame. We'll get the reference in a minute on this. The people see that they have been deluded. They eagerly accuse one another of having led them to destruction. Husbands accuse their wives. Wives accuse their husbands. Fellow church members accuse each other. You're the one that got me into this mess. and they're not very happy with each other right now. They eagerly accuse one another of having led them to destruction, but all unite in heaping their bitterest condemnation upon the ministers. Unfaithful pastors have prophesied smooth things. They have led their hearers to make void the law of God and to persecute those who would keep it holy. Now, in their despair, these teachers confess before the world their work of deception. They say to their people, "We knew Sunday wasn't the Bible Sabbath." Can you imagine how that's going to inflame those people, that they knew better? It's just like the Pharisees. The Pharisees knew Jesus was the Messiah, but they would not confess him. They would not admit to anybody that he was the Messiah, but they knew that he was. The multitudes are filled with fury. We are lost, they cry, and you are the cause of our ruin. And they turn upon the false watchmen, the very ones that once admired them most will pronounce the most dreadful curses upon them. You know, when you worship somebody and they let you down, you often hate them with a huge hatred. And that's what's going to happen to these pastors. Great Controversy 655 and 6 is where we've been reading. The very hands that once crowned them with laurels will be raised for their destruction. The swords which were to slay God's people are now employed to destroy their enemies. And guess who their enemies are? The pastors. Everywhere there is strife and bloodshed. The river is being dried up. Now, the Bible does address this issue, although it's overlooked by many, in Jeremiah 23, verses 1 and 2, and then Jeremiah 25, verses 34 and 5. Woe be unto the pastors that destroy and scatter the sheep of my pasture. God doesn't think kindly of pastors that teach false teaching to their people. And while he loves them, if they would accept the truth, if they continue to teach the error, it says, woe be unto the pastors that destroy and scatter the sheep of my pasture. Behold, I will visit upon you the evil of your doings. Howl, ye shepherds, and cry. Now, it's talking about that time. They're going to howl and cry, not only because they have taught the wrong, but because of the hatred that's coming against them. Howl, ye shepherds, and cry, and wallow yourselves in the ashes. Thank you. Ye principal of the flock, for your days for slaughter and of your dispersions are accomplished. In other words, you're finished. You're going to get wiped out, and you know it at this point. And the shepherds shall have no way to flee, nor the principal of the flock to escape. Now, I don't know whether principal is talking about administrators and the individual pastors, but they've all been involved, and they are finished at this point. Another one in Zechariah 14, verses 12 and 13. And this shall be the plague wherewith the Lord will smite all the people that have fought against Jerusalem. Their flesh. Now, this is hard to picture. The only thing I can think of is an atomic bomb. It's like it's even worse than the atomic bomb. Their flesh shall consume away. While they stand upon their feet, and their eyes shall consume away in their holes, and their tongue shall consume away in their mouth. And it shall come to pass in that day that a great tumult from the Lord shall be among them. And they shall lay hold, every one, on the hand of his neighbor, and his hand shall be against the hand of his neighbor. You've read those stories in the Old Testament where Israel arrived at the battlefield and all the soldiers were dead because they killed each other. This is another case like that, although they don't kill everybody. There's still some left for Jesus to destroy. But as we look at this, we see a horrible picture. In Great Controversy 657, it says, in the mad strife of their own fierce passions, and by the awful outpouring of God's unmingled wrath, fall the wicked inhabitants of the earth, priests, rulers, and people, rich and poor, high and low. It's not going to be the offshoots that destroy Adventists, but it's going to be those that are in that river Euphrates are going to experience, it says, begin at my house and destroy. And so priests and rulers and people, rich and poor, high and low, are wiped out, some by each other. It's going to get like this, Jeremiah 25:33. And the slain of the Lord shall be at that day from one end of the earth even unto the other end of the earth. They shall not be lamented, neither gathered nor buried. In other words, when this is done, when the seventh plague is done, there's nobody alive except the ones that go with Jesus. So there's nobody to bury them. They all are destroyed. And then finishing up the seventh plague, we read this in Revelation 16:18 through 21. There was a great earthquake, such as was not since men were upon the earth. So mighty an earthquake, and so great. Now we think the earthquakes are bad now, but can you imagine a worldwide earthquake? And the great city was divided into three parts. Now here it calls, instead of using the river Euphrates, it calls it the great city. But it breaks into three parts, so now there's no union anymore. And the great city was divided into three parts, and the cities of the nations fell. In other words, as a result of the earthquake, every city on earth crumbles to the ground. And great Babylon came in remembrance before God to give unto her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath. And every island fled away. Imagine every island sinking into the ocean. And the mountains were not found. So all the mountains tumbled down. Just, rocks coming down into the valley. And there fell upon men a great hail out of heaven, every stone about the weight of a talent. It's been estimated that's about 50 to 60 pounds. Hailstones that size, can you imagine? And men blasphemed God because of the plague of the hail, for the plague thereof was exceeding great. Now some things I've read make it sound like the rocks roll down into the ocean, and the ocean shoots the rocks up in the air And that's what makes this tremendous hail that pulverizes what's left of the earth. Here we also see the outcome of this seventh plague in Revelation 19, verses 19 through 21. And I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and their armies gathered together to make war against him that sat on the horse and against his army. Now they didn't think about that they were amassing their mighty army to fight God. Satan had convinced them they were in the right, but all of a sudden, God allows them to see that they're not in the right, they're on the wrong side. And he brings his army to destroy their army. This is the Battle of Armageddon, and God is completely successful. It says, and the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet that wrought miracles before him, with which he deceived them that had received the mark of the beast, and them that worshipped his image. These both were cast alive into the lake of fire, burning with brimstone, and the remnant were slain with the sword of him that sat upon the horse, which sword proceeded out of his mouth, and all the fowls were filled with their flesh. So every single one of them are wiped out. Nobody's left alive. The birds clean the carcasses from the earth, and that's the end of their mighty river, Euphrates. That they were, the leaders knew that they were in the wrong, but they taught the wrong anyway, and they got everyone inspired to be a part of them, but God always wins in the end. Now, if you're like me, I don't like to be on the losing side. I don't play games anymore, but when I did, I didn't like to be on the losing side. And so we had the privilege of being on the winning side. It will look like we're on the losing side for a long time, but in the end, we're on the winning side. You cannot go wrong to follow the Ten Commandments. It's impossible to go wrong. And although this mighty movement is gaining ground more and more all the time, we need to know where we ought to stand. And also, this ought to give us pity, not condemnation. I hope none of us that are here today will use what I have shared as condemnation of anyone, because that doesn't do any good. The picture is for us to be motivated in the kindest way possible, in the most loving way possible, to help people not end up in that mighty river Euphrates. And there's time still to help people not to end up in that. We need to do it wisely and carefully, because it's not an easy task. The devil is well along in his plans, and people think you're a crazy nut. So you have to really be wise how you go about it. But we know this is solid truth, and we need to do all we can to help those that would turn around while there's still time. May God bless us.